I've just pulled up at Marston Court, an estate in West London. I know people are living here because that's why I'm here. I'm here to interview a woman who's homeless and has been placed in here by the local council with her children. If I'd pulled up not knowing that, I would not know what I'm parked in front of right now were homes that people are living inside, because they are shipping containers. It's one shipping container piled on top of another shipping container on top of another one. The only thing that tells you that they may be more than that is that there's a hole being cut out the side of them and a door and a window being put in the front of one of them, and there are some sort of black metal stairs leading up to two of them. I've seen some pretty shocking things in the last 3 years doing this investigation. Some horrendous conditions that you wouldn't leave an animal inside. But this is something else, I think. It's bleak. There's something about the fact that it's raining as well. I don't know whether you can hear that. I'm sat in my car about to go inside, but there's just something about the weather. The grey skies are the same colour as the grey sheet metal. I mean, this is, some would say council's been innovative, that there's not enough houses, we know that. Not enough council houses, so people have to be put somewhere. And this is what we've come up with. People in the capital city of the United Kingdom living in shipping containers. Is this the best we can do? Is this the solution to this problem?
I feel just neglected. I just don't even feel like I'm human.
Have you told them about the problems in here?
I told them, so they don't care.
I have nowhere to go. I can't believe that this is happening.
I think it's disgusting.
We're not seriously saying the government have nothing to do with this.
Told them! I told them!
I want to see those homes built that the people of this country desperately need.
I don't want to be living in this condition.
Episode 8. Home. Mariah and I head up the black metal staircase to meet our first tenant. It's spring 2024, more than 3 years into this investigation, and I'm still tracking leaks.
My bathroom again.
Oh, it's leaking here as well.
Again, it's another leak.
Oh god. It's just soaking wet in there.
Yeah.
This is unbelievable.
It's a hot box in the summer. You're roasting in here, literally roasting.
What's the temperature get like in here in the summer?
I think about 38, 39.
Really?
Yeah.
39 degrees?
Yes, you're better outside than inside.
And in the winter?
Summer. And then in the winter it's freezing. We've constantly got to have the heating on.
How long have you been here for?
A year.
1 year?
Yeah.
When they said you were going to move here and you turned up and saw what was your...
Well, first they said it was a flat, a two-bed flat. So I was never aware of shipping containers. When I got here, I was just very overwhelmed, to be honest.
A couple of miles down the road, we find more shipping containers piled on top of one another. Mariah and I head up another set of outside metal stairs to the top floor and knock on Paula's container. She's living here with her son and daughter.
This is my cooking station.
Like your cooking station. So what exactly is that? I've never seen anything like that.
In the tiny kitchen, at the back of their main living space with a sofa and a television, is a microwave with 2 burnt-out hobs on top of it. That's the only cooking you have?
And it doesn't work properly.
Just off the small living room are 2 smaller bedrooms. They have cockroaches and leaks which drip onto the children's beds. But Paula's biggest worry is what's outside the containers.
There were like drug dealers coming in. There is a laundry room at the back of the buildings. And there were people doing drugs in there. Like I walked in to do my laundry with the kids. And there were a guy having stash of weed, cash, cocaine and different stuff. I got attacked, physically beaten up.
Here?
Yes.
Paula has been attacked for telling neighbours not to do drugs. She's a single mum living in a shipping container, and she'd done everything she could to avoid it.
I told the manager after he showed me around, and he said, "We are not going to offer you anything else.
You'll be homeless."
You will go on the streets with the kids." They were bombarding me with phone calls to accept it. And they said, "Oh, don't worry, this is going to be for a very short time." And look at me, I'm still here.
Paula tells me she moved into temporary accommodation with her son and daughter as she could no longer afford her rent following a breakup with their dad. I asked Paula if I could ask them some questions, and she agrees. When you first moved in and your mum said, "This is where we're staying,"
I was like, this can't be where we're staying. Like, we can't even invite friends over because, like, we're embarrassed of where we live.
how are you finding sleeping at night?
I wake up sometimes in the middle of the night. I can't sleep. I stay awake for like 3 hours. I can't sleep at all.
Back in the living room, away from the children doing their homework in the bedroom they share, I get a sense from Paula of the impact of the life they are now living.
They're doing counselling still. It affected us so much, and it's just so frustrated, and it angers me.
Just like almost everyone else we'd met in this investigation, Paula is bombarding the council with all the evidence she can provide.
My doctor from GP said, Paul, I'm sorry, I can't just keep writing letters, it's wasting my time. The head teacher of their school wrote letters, the police wrote emails.
It made no difference?
No difference, not at all.
So the price for Paula is keeping her children in an extremely cold or extremely hot, leaking shipping container to avoid the drug dealers outside, and waking with her son or daughter in the early hours just to get them through the night. Back outside, Mariah and I try to take it all in.
What did you think of that place?
I think it's shocking. I don't think you can understand it until you really see it, because you just can't imagine that in 2024 that they would be putting families in what only can be described as slum-like housing conditions.
Well, the one thing that struck me was everyone we spoke to said when they were first told by the council they were coming here, they just got the address and it said a 2-bed flat in Acton.
Yeah.
And then they turned up and they saw it. They saw what we're seeing now for the first time. How do you even register that someone would put you in here to live? We're two people that are quite hard to shock after everything we've seen. But I can't get over this.
It's like a living nightmare, isn't it?
We soon learned of another homeless family in Stoke-on-Trent who were resorting to the most desperate measures to put a roof over their heads. And what we discovered was yet another national wake-up call.
Live from Television Centre in London, this is Good Morning Britain with Kate Garraway and Richard Madeley.
British parents who've got pretty good, reasonably well-paid jobs are being forced to live in tents. As there's nowhere that they can afford to rent, let alone buy, and councils have no homes for them.
An ITV News investigation met one couple who've spent 7 weeks living in someone else's back garden while their children are kind of sofa surfing, staying with friends.
Nearly everything we asked for help for, it was, are you on benefits? No, we both work. Well, we can't help you. So it's like, what's the point in working? It's demoralising.
Even with the children, they're still not helping us. There's nothing we can do.
ITV Investigations correspondent Daniel Hewitt, who has spent time with these families, is joining us now. These are hard-working, working-class people who haven't got a home.
I'd like to say that what you're seeing there is an extreme example, but I've met countless families now who are homeless and don't know what to do. That TV appearance came in the morning. 16 hours later, I was back in the ITV News office, live on News at 10 opposite Tom Bradby. And after so many years of telling these stories, each getting worse and worse, it was time to stand back and call this for what it was. I think if you wanted to create a housing crisis, you would pretty much do to the letter what we've done in Britain in the last 40 years. You would sell off council houses, more than 1 million, and you would stop councils from replacing them, from rebuilding them. You would have house price inflation, so people on low and then modest incomes can no longer afford to buy a home, which pushes them into the private rental sector. You then don't regulate or reform the private rental sector to give renters any protection against quick-fire evictions. And then on top of that, you consistently don't build enough houses. So rent goes up, competition goes up, and you end up in situations like this. What we're seeing here, Tom, being no doubt, is years, decades in the making. And I have to say, the gap between the problem and the solution is big. Both parties, the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, say housing is a priority. I see little evidence that is the case. Rishi Sunak has his 5 pledges, not one of them is on housing. Keir Starmer has his 5 pledges, none of them are on housing. There's little detail in Labour's plan. Many people say what is needed here is a kind of 1950s style response, a mass house building across the country. I have to say one little thing, Tom, a glimmer of hope tonight. Ian and Teresa in Stoke have just been offered a home, a council property. They are, though, a rarity. This problem is not a housing crisis, it's a housing emergency, and we're seeing the working poor becoming the working homeless in this country. My work isn't really the type to go viral on Instagram and TikTok, But a couple of weeks later, a friend sent me a message. It was a photo he'd taken of the passenger in front of him on the train, watching a video on her phone of me doing that live you've just heard. A quick search on Instagram and I found it. It had been clipped up and titled, "This journalist nails the housing crisis in 1 minute." It had racked up 5 million views. It had actually taken me 3 years to fully understand what had gone wrong. To me, it showed there was a huge interest in housing and an appetite to understand the problems in it. We, as the media, have been wrong to treat it as a niche topic for so long, not seeing that it speaks to so many people's lives, why it matters so much. Although a follow-up message from the same friend was to tell me that the next video the woman on the train watched after my monologue was of a pelican eating a pigeon. While we were seeing bigger interest on social media, housing was undoubtedly moving up the news agenda too, getting more attention than at any point in the time I've been covering this crisis turned emergency. And why is it an emergency? Because as Mariah and I reflected on, it's now pushing councils to the absolute brink.
What we heard over and over again, and councils are being more vocal about it now, is that the bill for temporary accommodation is ballooning, and soon it's going to cause them to either go bankrupt or to have to literally cut all vital services other than housing. The most extreme example we found was on the south coast. Eastbourne Council say 49p in every pound of tax is now being spent housing people in temporary accommodation such as B&Bs, hotels and hostels.
49p in every pound. So every pound they bring in tax, half of it almost is going on housing people. I don't think people know that. Everyone we told that stat to has just gone, doesn't believe it. This is pushing councils to the edge. It's pushing councils to publicly say we will not exist unless someone gives us money to house these families, because there's not enough houses for them and we haven't got enough money to put them in temporary housing.
Our latest shocking discoveries allowed me the chance to speak again to the Housing Secretary, Michael Gove.
We have working people right now living in caravans, in vans, hostels, working people. How has that happened in a civilised society?
Well, across the Western world, we have a housing crisis. So whether it's in the Republic of Ireland, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, the Netherlands.
That's the cold comfort for anyone listening to this interview, Mr. Gove.
All of us face the same problems. And of course, it's unconscionable. It's indefensible to have people who are working, living in the conditions that you and others...
So why are they?
Well, each individual case will have unique circumstances. But broadly, one of the challenges that we face is just making sure that we have more homes of every kind.
Homes of every kind would not come quickly, and it was finally time for me to meet the kind of people who were actively trying to stop them. I'd spoken to lots of people in our investigation, tenants, landlords, politicians, but I really wanted to speak to people trying to stop homes being built at a time when everyone else is telling me new homes are exactly what is needed. So we head down to Frome in Somerset. With its rolling cobbled streets and artisan coffee shops, it's an affluent middle-class town. But local people on low incomes are being forced out with nowhere for them to go. Plans to build 1,700 homes are being successfully blocked by a local campaign group who take me to see the large plot of greenfield land developers are trying to get permission to build on.
All the way from over there, right from the tree line over there, it will cover the whole of these fields.
Are the campaigners just NIMBYs, the not in my backyard opponents to homes being built, or are their concerns of a major new development legitimate? I sit down with 3 of them in one of their homes to hear their reservations.
I've lived here for nearly 40 years and I don't want to see it ruined by this massive parasite.
We've met people who are living with their parents still in their 30s with children. They might say, well, you guys were able to buy a house at a time when it was affordable, now you own your own home.
We all appreciate that houses are needed, but houses of a certain type. Build lots of council houses.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So if this was 1,700 council houses, would you be okay with it?
I still think that's too many.
Reservation. But some people would say this is classic NIMBYism. This is, don't build houses where I live because I quite like it the way it is. What would you say to that?
Oh, I think that is rubbish.
The next day, I go back to the Greenfield site with James, the land agent in charge of the application to build those 1,700 homes.
We can guarantee there'll be 510 affordable homes on this site that come forward.
That promise is doubted by the campaign group, but clearly homes are needed here.
It is frustrating. Froome's have been delivering 24 affordable homes per year.
24?
24 affordable homes per year over the last 17 years. We go to these public consultations. The people that don't want housing, that live in a house, will turn up and be quite vocal. Take a very brave person to turn up within that sort of environment and say, I want housing.
Do you think the current planning system is fit for purpose, that it's dealing with the urgency of this crisis?
It's in a bad state. I think these policies are more political than focused on what we really need to do in the country and build and deliver houses.
But the politics was soon to be put to the test. I was talking to James a few weeks after Rishi Sunak had stepped out of number 10 Downing Street to be met by pouring rain and the sound of protest music to announce.
Earlier today, I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
As I'd expected, neither Rishi Sunak nor Sir Keir Starmer prioritised housing within a campaign that descended pretty quickly into personal attacks and disputed money claims rather than any serious policy debates.
How many hundreds is it? Is it 200?
I'm going to turn to the next question now.
Is it 400?
I think the Prime Minister must have put a bet on how many times he's going to interrupt me.
Yet back here in Frome, after our interview, James was in little doubt as to which party he wanted in power. He was undoubtedly a wealthy man, the son of a racehorse owner, yet he told me every single person he knew in house building, developers, land agents, planning officers, including himself, were going to vote Labour. They believed Labour when they said they would reform the planning system to get more homes built. No one in his world, James told me, wanted another Conservative government. Rishi Sunak's decision to call an early election also meant Michael Gove's long-held promise to get Section 21 banned by the next election was not delivered. In truth, it was scuppered by his own side, blocked by Conservative backbenchers who, while scrutinising the Renters Reform Bill in Parliament, confirmed they had skin in the game.
I do own 2 buy-to-rent, buy-to-lets.
I'm joint owner of a property that is let out for residential rent.
I'm also the joint owner of a property that is let out.
I'm also the joint owner of 2 properties.
Not all of those were Conservatives, but of the 103 MPs we discovered were landlords, 85% were Tories. Their lobbying to water down the Renters Reform Bill in favour of landlords meant the Conservatives were unable to pass the key legislation they had placed in their own manifesto. It was a damaging and final defeat for Michael Gove, who confirmed he would be standing down at the election. He had been the 6th Housing Secretary to serve under 5 Tory Prime Ministers in just 9 years. Across 14 years, Britain had also seen 15 different housing ministers before election night brought the merry-go-round of roles to a crashing end.
The exit poll is here. It is predicting a Labour landslide, a Labour majority of 170. That is a simply astonishing result.
The country's housing crisis was now Labour's problem.
Have no doubt that we will rebuild Britain. Brick by brick, we will rebuild the infrastructure of opportunity. The affordable homes that I know are the ingredients of hope for working people. Our work is urgent, and we begin it today. Thank you very much.
While Sir Keir Starmer had been reluctant to spotlight his party's housing plans during the campaign, on day one, the first full working day of the new government, it was put front and centre, delivered by the new Chancellor, Rachel Reeves.
I am taking immediate action to deliver this Labour government's mission to kickstart economic growth, including 1.5 million homes in the next 5 years. Our golden rules will allow us to deliver the thousands of affordable homes too, including more for social rent.
For Rachel Reeves, house building is not just a moral mission, but an economic one. She is linking it to growth, economic growth, that Labour has based its entire platform for government on. They have, in many ways, bet the house on it. But some context here. What Labour is planning to do has not been done for nearly 50 years. 1.5 million homes means building 300,000 each year. The last time that was achieved was 1977, and that's because 150,000 of them were social homes. Today we build less than 1/10 of that every year. But that is Labour's promise. and it's on the advice of Alison Inman.
We're in a national emergency and we need to, almost get on a war footing to deal with this, because everything else is completely and utterly buggered unless we've got places for people to live in.
The expert voice in this podcast was later brought in by Labour to advise on its housing policy before it entered government. Luckily for us, she had been spelling it all out to me long before that, back in the pub around the corner from work.
I don't think people want the state to be paying, getting on for £2 billion a year to put people in old office blocks. I don't think that's what people want.
It takes bravery in terms of a government saying, we're going to override the local planning laws here. I'm sorry. Yep. I know you're annoyed at me, but I'm going to have to build on that land.
Yep.
I'm sorry, NIMBYs, but it's going to have to happen. And is the problem here that too many politicians over the last 30, 40 years have not been willing to make that call?
Yeah, absolutely.
And anyone that since has tried to touch that subject has felt that they've become unelectable.
Essentially, I don't believe that we can sort the issues of young people wanting to buy, about conditions, about ending homelessness, about tackling temporary accommodation, unless we build social housing. Why wouldn't you do that in the first year of a first term? This is a 2-term problem. It's a 3-term problem. But actually, once you begin to create places where people can lead fulfilling lives, it would be a brave politician to stop doing that. I'm 60 and I know my son will inherit a worse world than I did, and I thought it was always about things getting better, and it doesn't feel like that. But if we crack this, we'll have a fighting chance.
So that's Alison's advice. Build more social housing, build a better future. So will a Labour government do that? 3 months on, I got another invite to speak to Power.
So I'm back in Westminster, and I'm in Westminster Hall, which is the oldest part of the Palace of Westminster. It's a grand hall that's been here for centuries, and in a few minutes' time I'll walk out of here up the steps to the left back to Central Lobby, where I'll be interviewing the new Housing Secretary, Angela Rayner, who is fresh in post. Now, Angela Rayner is someone I've known for a long time. I've known her for well over a decade. When I was a young political reporter in the northwest of England covering Greater Manchester, and she was a backbench Labour MP in Greater Manchester. She's now probably in the top 3 most powerful people in the government. She's not only the Housing Secretary, but also the Deputy Prime Minister. And she now has the power to do the things that she's been wanting to do her entire life, which is support and help people from the kind of background that she grew up in. As a child in Stockport, she relied on social housing. For her, it's been a platform for the life she's built for herself, a life and a platform which is now being denied to more and more people because we're not building enough houses. She wants to build more houses, but it's one thing saying you'll do something and it's another doing it. This government has promised during the election campaign to build more social homes. It has yet to say how many, and it's yet to say exactly when. That is one of the questions I want to ask her, and I'll be asking her very shortly.
Up to go. Your name and title, please.
Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister.
And Housing Secretary.
And Housing Secretary, yeah. I mean, if I give you all my titles, we'll be here a long time.
And so we begin. Me questioning her on the latest renters' rights bill that was being introduced, and why it wasn't trying to impose rent controls, before we move past the day's news lines and to the heart of this housing crisis.
Got this pressure on the rental market. Far too many people are stuck in private rental when they want to own their first home, and that's why we've got to build those 1.5 million homes in this Parliament to ensure that people can get on the property ladder, but also that we fix the social housing situation we see, the chronic situation in council homes and social homes that we desperately need in the UK.
On social homes, on personal experience, you grew up in council housing. Does it make you angry, frustrate you, to see people being denied access now to safe, decent, affordable social homes?
People know that I grew up in a council house, and they know that I grew up in deep poverty. I was a child that was on free school meals, and my parents needed additional support as I was growing up. But I was never in fear of losing my home. That council home was a foundation in which I was able to go to school, I was able to get that support when my family needed it most, which has meant that I've been able to do and achieve the things that I achieve today. So it's really personal to me that our children, so many of them, are in homelessness, temporary accommodation, or at risk of becoming homeless because of we haven't got this reforms on Section 21 no fault evictions, and that's why I'm determined to fix the rental market and to build the homes we desperately need.
You talk about the 1.5 million homes. How many of those are going to be social homes?
We've said we'll release Grey Belt, and we've talked about our new towns, so there will be proportions of affordable and social housing within that.
How many? Because Shelter and other charities consistently say 90,000 a year are needed in England. The previous Housing Secretary, Michael Gove, often said, similar to you, that we need more social homes, but never put a number on it.
I want to see the biggest in a generation of council and social homes built, and I'll be using all the levers to make sure that there is a proportion of that, significant proportion, will be social housing.
What is the difference, though, between yourself and Michael Gove? I'm trying to get a sense of what's different.
Well, I think the difference is we saw that Michael Gove was saying the right things, but whilst in government, didn't deliver it. And his backbenchers very much stopped the Renters Bill coming forward and the reforms that we were pushing for, that we're going to deliver on, and failed to meet their housing targets. I've put local authorities on notice, housing developers on notice. I want to see those homes built that the people of this country desperately need.
Final question. You've got a big brief here. Deputy Prime Minister, Housing Secretary, I think I've counted 7 bills that are going through your department right now. At the end of this, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, what is the thing that you want to achieve when it comes to housing? You look back and say, that's what I did.
I want safe, secure homes and decent, secure jobs. They're my 2 priorities. As Deputy Prime Minister, I want to do justice to those victims of Grenfell. I want the 1.5 million homes we build to be the homes that people need, including those council and social housing. And I want to make sure that people have got good jobs so that they can afford to get a mortgage, to get their first home that they desperately want.
Thank you, Housing Secretary. Appreciate it. Very quick 2-shot, then we'll leave you alone.
A few minutes later, I head back down the big stone steps to Westminster Hall to gather my thoughts.
I think, for me, a couple of things stood out there in that interview. I think she reiterated that the issue of social housing is particularly personal to her because of her background. I expected her to talk about that. But off camera, she was talking about how busy the next few months are going to be for her, but she relishes it because this is why she came into politics. There's no point being here if you're not going to try and do something and be busy, is what she said to me. I do think, though, at some point this government is going to have to come off the fence when it comes to numbers. As much as Angela Rayner didn't like my comparison with Michael Gove, the fact is, at this moment, she is all talk as well. And that 1.5 million homes they've promised, we don't know what proportion will be social homes. I think, at the moment, Angela Rayner is banking on the public believing her more than Michael Gove because of her background, because she's Labour, because people inherently link the Labour Party with building more council homes, more social homes. But at some point they're going to have to deliver. People are going to want to see spades in the ground and new homes for people to move into. And right now, they won't say how many.
For trapped tenant turned housing campaigner Kwadwo Tweneboa, the government simply can't afford not to build more social homes.
Right after the Second World War, they took the approach I've been saying that government needs to take now. It affects the NHS. We know they spent last year £1.4 billion looking after people living in poor conditions. We know now that it's over 145,000 homeless kids. That's enough to fill the O2 Arena more than 8 times over, simply with kids that don't have a place to call home. Yet that was never acknowledged up until this point, and I hope the tide is turning.
To hear Kwadwo there, it's remarkable to think that just a few years ago he lacked the power to get even a repairman out to his dilapidated flat. Now he's on every platform, from TV and podcasts to the front page of magazines and newspaper supplements, delivering home truths for the new government and demanding change. There's been a lot happen in the last 3 years, and there's been a change in the law, and there has been more talk about housing, I think, than I can remember in my lifetime. It feels like we are starting to see a change. Do you ever sit there with, I know your favourite drink is a porn star martini.
Porn star martini, yeah.
Do you ever sit there with a porn star martini on a Friday night and think, I've helped bring this about?
I don't think I've had that chance to sit down and actually reflect and think back of everything that's happened, the change that's happened. Yeah, I've been on social media, but we've had people and campaigners before. Yes, mine might have been slightly different, and I took a more of a grassroots and more bullish technique in trying to hold landlords to account, but I think it's a collective. And had ITV not been doing those stories, at that time that I was standing in my mum's living room and watching Ceesay in Croydon in her home filled with mould and leaks, my path could have been very, very different. What changed things was going behind closed doors and showing people the raw reality of how they were living, and ITV did that.
So I'm back where this investigation began, on Regina Road in Croydon, and I'm standing in front of the door that I first walked through. Quajo talked there about going behind closed doors, and he's right. Opening that first door here in front of me now and meeting Franzoy and Leroy made all the difference. The difference is that door is now boarded up. Yellow coloured cladding covers the entire bottom floor of this building, wrapped around this 11-storey tower block. The pebble dash is still here, but next to it is this metal sheeting. And if I walk around the building on the corner where Franzoy's flat was, there's graffiti written across what was her living room window. And this tower block is now completely empty. There's a couple of windows open and some curtains closed. You'd think people are actually still living here, but they're not. The whole building has been completely evacuated, and we're told that in just a few weeks it's going to be demolished.
Change is finally coming to this part of Croydon, almost 4 years after I left those escape rooms and called Imogen in a rage.
And it was just two people from that beginning piece that made this happen, Franzoy and Leroy, and it was their bravery that brought that building down, brought this crisis to the fore.
Franzoy and Leroy, as we know, were moved out of that building after that report, and what happened then was there was this national scandal and a big conversation, and the tenants in that building said, well, what about us? We're still stuck living here. And so what followed was this big public consultation about what would happen to the building, and the council gave the tenants an option. You can either repair the building or we can regenerate it, and they voted to knock the whole thing down and start again.
And not only that tower block, but every tower block on the road.
Yeah.
And also 50 million quid, as I understand it, being given by Sadiq Khan to rebuild some new ones.
Yeah, it just shows that you said the power of people when they speak out. But how many are not emailing us, don't have the confidence to, don't have the ability to. Mm-hmm. For how many people we've reported on, how many people are still out there going through the same thing and will never get the kind of attention that this investigation has given.
If I've learned anything throughout this whole investigation, it's that housing means everything. It is the starting point for happy, healthy lives. Without a home, a stable, secure, safe place to live, what are we? It's impossible to flourish, to thrive, to create, to prosper. Going behind so many closed doors, meeting countless tenants in rotting, dangerous flats, and families crushed into single hotel rooms or shipping containers, I found sadness, desperation and fear. Parents sheltering their kids from the horrors, telling them it's an adventure, that things will be fixed soon. And yet the crushing conclusion of our investigation is that these children may never have a permanent home. What hope is there for this nowhere generation? Britain needs a government willing and able to build more affordable housing. At the inquiry in Parliament, an MP asked me for my opinion, and I said, I'm not paid to have opinions, and I'm not. But after all I have seen in this broken system, I defy anyone to come to any other conclusion. You can legislate to protect tenants, you can punish landlords that don't, but the tough bit is creating more homes. It'll take political ambition and a sense of urgency, and when it comes to building lots and lots of houses, an acceptance that you're going to upset a few, probably even a lot of people. But it's worth listening again to that quote from Margaret Thatcher in 1974.
Every government has a duty to house the nation in good houses. It won't be cheap, especially at a time when money is tight. But it's a question of where you spend government money. And we spend it where it is needed, We know it's needed in housing.
We're 50 years on from that. It's advice many would say Thatcher did not even listen to herself. We are still living in the shadow of her revolution of the housing market. But what she said, at least, remains as true today as it ever did, about that duty for the state to house its citizens in good houses, that it won't be cheap, that we know money is tight, but we know it is needed. Succeed, and the gains are obvious. Fail, and you can sign the next generation, and the next generation, and the generation after that, to become the trapped. If you want to see any of the visuals from this series, head to thetrapped.co.uk or follow the link in the show notes. If you are in bad housing or your living situation is under threat, you'll also find a full list of people to contact to get help. The Trapped is presented by me, Daniel Hewitt, alongside Imogen Barra. It's written by myself and David Williams, with archiving by Alpha Ceesay and Lauren Aarons. Audio production and sound design is by Meic, Parry and Jack Soper. The series is produced and directed by David Williams. The executive producers are Matt Williams and Ed Saunt.